Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
Some people say your wedding day is one of the most important days of your life, a moment you'll treasure forever, a day filled with love, joy, and the presence of those who care about you most. I wouldn't know, because my family wasn't there to see mine. I had always known, somewhere deep inside, that I came second to my younger sister, Rachel, that no matter what I did, no matter how much I tried, she would always be their favorite. But I had never imagined, not in my worst nightmares, that they would actually choose to miss my wedding, that they would decide a last-minute party for her boyfriend was more important than the day I had been dreaming about since I was a child. The morning of my wedding started the way I had hoped it would, with nervous excitement humming in my chest, with my bridesmaids bustling around me, adjusting my dress, touching up my makeup, making sure everything was perfect. I kept glancing at the clock, expecting my phone to ring, expecting a text from my parents telling me they were on their way, expecting some kind of acknowledgement that this day meant something to them. But as the hours passed, as the ceremony time inched closer, the sinking feeling in my stomach only grew heavier, turning into something sharp and painful, something I couldn't ignore no matter how much I tried to push it away. I finally checked my phone, heart pounding, fingers shaking slightly as I unlocked the screen, hoping and praying that maybe they had just been running late, that maybe something had come up, but they would still make it in time. And then I saw it. A single message from my mother, sent less than an hour before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, a text so casual, so dismissive, so utterly cruel in its simplicity that I had to read it twice just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. We are so sorry, but Rachel's throwing a huge surprise party for Tyler, and we can't miss it. We'll make it up to you soon. Have a wonderful day. I stared at the words, my mind going blank, my breath catching in my throat as a cold wave of disbelief crashed over me. I had prepared myself for disappointment, had told myself not to expect too much, had reminded myself over and over again that they had always put Rachel first. But this? This was something else entirely. This was them making a conscious decision to skip my wedding, my once-in-a-lifetime moment, my day, to go to a party Rachel had thrown together at the last minute for her boyfriend's birthday. Someone said my name, snapping me out of my daze, and I forced myself to smile, forced myself to swallow the lump in my throat, forced myself to pretend I was fine. I had no other choice. There were guests waiting, my fiancé standing at the altar, a room full of people expecting me to walk down that aisle with joy in my heart. So, I did. I walked, I smiled, I said my vows, I kissed my husband, and I pretended God, I pretended so well. But the entire time, as I stood there in my white dress, as I exchanged rings, as I laughed and posed for pictures, all I could think about was that text, those words, that brutal confirmation that I would always, always come second. It wasn't until later that night, long after the guests had gone home, long after the cake had been cut and the last dance had been shared, that I finally let myself look. I opened my phone, clicked on social media, and there it was, photo after photo, video after video, post after post of my parents and Rachel grinning, laughing, drinking, celebrating, having the time of their lives at the party they had chosen over me. My mother had even posted a long, glowing message about how proud she was of Rachel for pulling off such an amazing surprise for Tyler, about how family always comes first, about how special it was to see Rachel so happy. I should have known then I was never their priority. And I never would be. I woke up the morning after my wedding with a hollow feeling in my chest, a strange mixture of exhaustion and numbness settling into my bones as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that the day before had actually happened. I had gotten married, had said my vows, had stood in front of my friends and my husband and sworn to build a life together, but instead of feeling the warmth and joy that I had always imagined would follow such a day, all I felt was the sharp, lingering sting of disappointment. It wasn't about the wedding itself, wasn't about the decorations or the flowers or the perfect dress I had spent months picking out. It was about the empty seats where my parents should have been. About the message that had shattered any last illusion I had been holding on to, about the realization that they had never truly seen me as someone worth showing up for. I didn't want to let it fester, didn't want to let the resentment take root so deeply that it poisoned what should have been the happiest time of my life, so I told myself that I would at least try to talk to them, that I would give them the chance to explain. That maybe somehow, they would realize just how badly they had hurt me. I didn't expect miracles, didn't expect grand apologies or dramatic gestures of remorse, but I needed to hear them acknowledge it, needed them to say, just once, that I had mattered enough for them to regret their choice. But when I called my mother later that afternoon, when she finally picked up after 3 rings, her voice bright and casual as if nothing had happened, as if everything was completely normal. As if she hadn't ignored her own daughter's wedding to attend a last-minute party for Rachel's boyfriend, I knew before she even spoke a full sentence that I had been fooling myself. Jessica. Finally. I was wondering when you'd call. How is everything? I'm sure it was just beautiful. I can't wait to see the pictures. I sat there in stunned silence for a moment, my grip tightening on the phone, my heart pounding in my ears, because she sounded genuinely excited, genuinely unbothered, genuinely unaware that she had done anything wrong. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay calm, steady, controlled, even though I could feel my entire body vibrating with the sheer force of everything I was holding back. Mom, are you serious right now? You missed my wedding. You and Dad both missed the most important day of my life, and you didn't even bother to call. You didn't check in, didn't apologize, didn't even acknowledge that what you did was unbelievably cruel. There was a pause, just long enough for me to hope that maybe, just maybe, she was going to say the words I needed to hear. But then she let out a long, exasperated sigh, the kind she had always used when she thought I was being unreasonable, and her tone shifted into something colder, sharper, laced with the same dismissive attitude that had made me feel small for my entire life. Oh, Jessica, don't be so dramatic. Rachel's event was important too, and we couldn't just cancel on her at the last minute. It wasn't like we were doing it to hurt you. You know how much we love you, sweetheart, but we had to make a decision, and Rachel really needed us to be there for her. I don't know what I had been expecting, but it wasn't that. It wasn't the complete lack of remorse, wasn't the casual way she brushed my pain aside, wasn't the way she made it sound like Rachel's party had been just as significant as my wedding, like the two events were somehow equal, like I was the selfish one for thinking my day should have mattered more. I don't remember exactly what I said next, don't remember how the conversation ended, don't remember whether I hung up first or if she did, because by the time I put my phone down, my hands were shaking, my chest was heaving. And I felt like I had been completely gutted. It was like all the air had been sucked out of the room, like everything I had ever needed from them had just slipped through my fingers one last time, like I had been clinging to a ghost of something that had never truly been there. And that was when I knew. That was when I understood, with a level of clarity so sharp it almost hurt, that I was never going to come first, never going to be their priority, never going to be the daughter they chose to love the way they loved Rachel. I had spent my entire life making excuses for them, pretending the favoritism wasn't as obvious as it really was, telling myself that one day they would see me, that one day they would show up. But they never would. They had made their choice, and now I was making mine. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't let the anger swallow me whole. I just blocked them. Every single one of them. My mother. My father. Rachel. I erased them from my phone, removed them from my social media, deleted every point of contact that they could use to reach me, and when I was done, when the last trace of them had been wiped from my life, I let out a slow, steady breath, feeling something inside me settle, something inside me finally break free. I had always been afraid of what it would feel like to walk away from them, always wondered if I would regret it, always hesitated because deep down, I had still wanted their love. But in that moment, sitting in my quiet apartment with my husband by my side, with the weight of years of disappointment finally lifting off my shoulders, I realized something that had never been clearer in my entire life. I didn't need them. I never had. And then, just as I was starting to let myself feel that newfound sense of peace, my phone buzzed one last time, a single, final message slipping through before Rachel's number disappeared from my contacts forever. Wow, you're really making a big deal out of this, Jess. You need to get over yourself already. It's not our fault you're so obsessed with being the victim all the time. Hope it was worth it. I stared at the message for a long moment, reading it over and over again, feeling something inside me go ice cold, something that wasn't sadness or anger or grief, but something else entirely. If they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, fine. I could pretend just as well as they could. It had been months since I had spoken to my parents, months since I had cut them off, months since I had last seen Rachel's name pop up on my phone, and in that time, I had started to feel something I never thought I would peace. There was no more waiting for texts that would never come, no more hoping they would suddenly realize how much they had hurt me, no more forcing myself to believe that one day I would be enough for them. I had built a life without them, had surrounded myself with people who actually cared, had thrown myself into my marriage, into my career, into the things that actually made me happy, and for the first time in years, I felt free. And then, completely out of nowhere, everything changed. The first message came late one evening, long after I had settled into bed, my phone buzzing on the nightstand with a notification that I almost ignored until I saw the name flashing on the screen, Mom. My stomach clenched, my fingers hesitating for only a moment before I swiped to open it, already bracing myself for whatever guilt-tripping, passive-aggressive nonsense she had decided to throw at me this time. But instead of the usual condescending remarks or dismissive apologies, instead of another attempt to make me feel like I was the problem, there was just one single line that made my entire body go still. Call me. We need to talk. I stared at the words, confused, wary, trying to figure out what had changed, why, after all this time, she suddenly wanted to talk. And then, before I could even process it, another message came in, this time from a number I hadn't seen in years, my cousin, Sarah. Jess, have you heard about your aunt and uncle? Call me ASAP. My heart started pounding, a strange mix of dread and curiosity settling in my chest as I unlocked my phone and quickly typed out a response, my fingers flying across the screen as I asked her what had happened. As I waited for the answer that I somehow already knew was going to change everything. When she finally responded, the words felt like a punch straight to the gut. They passed away last night. Their lawyer is trying to get in touch with you. Jess, they left everything to you. I reread the message at least 3 times, my mind struggling to wrap around what she was saying, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts as I tried to process the fact that my aunt and uncle, the only 2 family members who had ever truly treated me like I mattered, the only 2 who had ever made an effort to be part of my life, the only 2 who had ever shown up for me when my own parents never did, were gone. And not only were they gone, but they had left everything they owned to me. It didn't take long for the news to spread. By the next morning, my phone was flooded with messages, my voicemail completely full, my inbox overflowing with texts and missed calls from people who hadn't spoken to me in years, people who had ignored me, dismissed me, treated me like an afterthought, and now suddenly couldn't wait to hear my voice. Jessica, sweetheart, we've been thinking about you so much. Let's reconnect. Family is everything, no matter what. We should get together soon. Hey, Jess, I know things have been tense, but we should really talk. We miss you. Every single message made me want to laugh, made me want to scream, made me want to throw my phone against the wall, because the only thing that had changed was the money. They hadn't suddenly realized they had treated me terribly, hadn't suddenly grown a conscience, hadn't suddenly woken up and decided to be decent human beings. No, they had simply found out that I was now the sole heir to a multi-million-dollar estate, and like clockwork, they had come crawling back. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any more pathetic, I saw it. A text from Rachel. Jess, OMG, I just heard the news. We need to talk. This could be such a great opportunity for all of us. I read the words, feeling my stomach churn with a mixture of disgust and amusement, because of course, she hadn't even bothered to pretend she actually cared. There was no apology, no fake concern, No attempt to mend things, just immediate, blatant, shameless entitlement, as if she had already decided in her mind that whatever I had inherited was somehow meant to be shared with her. As if I would be stupid enough to fall back into their trap. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat back, my phone still buzzing, my notifications still piling up, my mind racing as I let them think I was considering it, let them believe that I was playing along, let them wonder just how much they could get out of me. Because if they wanted to use me, if they thought they could manipulate me, if they truly believed that after everything they had done, after everything they had put me through, I was going to roll over and give them what they wanted, oh, they had another thing coming. They ignored my wedding, but now they suddenly care? Oh, this was going to be fun. The message came from my mother first, carefully worded in a way that was meant to sound loving and remorseful, but I saw through it the moment I read the first sentence. She wanted to talk things through, wanted to fix the family, wanted us to put the past behind us because, according to her, life was too short to hold grudges, and at the end of the day, family was all that really mattered. It was almost laughable how predictable it was, how suddenly, after months of silence, after months of pretending I didn't exist, she now wanted to mend things. Of course, it had absolutely nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with guilt or regret, had nothing to do with realizing she had hurt me. It was about the money. It was always about the money. I didn't respond right away, didn't let them know that I had already made up my mind about what I was going to do, didn't give them any indication that I was onto them. Instead, I let them wait, let them wonder, let them stew in their own desperation until my father finally caved and sent another message, his words carefully chosen, his tone dripping with the kind of forced warmth that made my stomach turn. "Sweetheart, we would really love to see you. Let's have dinner, just us as a family, like old times. We want to make things right. Like old times." I almost laughed out loud at that, at the sheer audacity of it, at the way they were suddenly rewriting history as if they had ever treated me as an equal, as if they had ever chosen me over Rachel, as if they had ever once made me feel like I truly belonged. But instead of laughing, instead of calling them out, instead of telling them exactly where they could shove their dinner invitation, I smiled, composed myself, and responded with a single word. Okay. The restaurant they chose was expensive, a place I knew my parents wouldn't normally spend money on unless they were trying to impress someone, trying to project an image, trying to make themselves look like the perfect, well-off, put-together family. When I arrived, I spotted them immediately, sitting at a table near the window, my mother already waving enthusiastically, my father standing up to pull out my chair. Rachel sitting there with that same smug look on her face that told me she still thought she was one step ahead. "Jess! Oh, sweetheart, you look beautiful." My mother reached across the table, grabbing my hands in hers, her touch unfamiliar, too forced, too rehearsed, as if she had practiced this exact moment in her head 100 times before I even walked through the door. "We've missed you so much," my father added, his voice warm, his expression carefully crafted to convey just the right amount of concern, as if I was the prodigal daughter returning home after some childish rebellion. I played my part perfectly, smiling, nodding, letting them think I was actually considering forgiving them, letting them think I had been lonely, lost, desperate for my family's love. I let them talk, let them gush about how much they had regretted everything, let them tell me that they just wanted to be part of my life again, let them butter me up with hollow words and empty promises, and then, just as I had expected, just as I had known they would, they got to the real reason they had invited me here. "We were thinking, sweetheart, since things got so complicated with your wedding, maybe you and Daniel could have another ceremony, something small, something intimate, something we could all be part of," my mother suggested. Her voice dripping with carefully feigned excitement, her eyes watching me closely, gauging my reaction, waiting for me to take the bait. I didn't even have to glance at Rachel to know she was smirking, to know she was sitting there thinking that this was all going exactly as planned, to know that she had convinced herself that not only was I going to forgive them, but that I was going to hand over my inheritance like a fool who still believed in family loyalty. I tilted my head slightly, pretending to consider it, pretending their words were slowly breaking down my resolve, pretending they were winning. A second wedding? I echoed, my voice soft, thoughtful, as if I was truly moved by the idea, as if I was actually considering letting them back into my life after everything they had done. My mother nodded eagerly, her grip on my hand tightening, her smile widening. Yes! A chance to start over, a chance for us to do things right. We could even invite more family, make it a real celebration. I glanced at my father, saw the way he was nodding along, saw the way his expression was carefully neutral, as if he was trying not to push too hard, trying not to scare me off. And then I turned my gaze to Rachel, to the sister who had spent our entire lives ensuring that I was always second place, always the afterthought, always the one waiting in the background while she took center stage. She was watching me carefully, her lips curled into the faintest smirk, her fingers idly tapping against the table, her body language screaming confidence, as if she already knew exactly what was going to happen, as if she had already decided that I was weak enough to fall for their act. And that was when I knew I had them. They thought I was playing their game, thought I was sitting there, soaking in their attention, desperate to be part of the family again, willing to believe that they actually cared. They thought they had reeled me in, thought they were just a few sweet words away from getting exactly what they wanted, thought they had manipulated me into handing them access to a fortune they believed should have been theirs. They had no idea what was coming. I smiled at them, slow and deliberate, my fingers lightly tracing the rim of my wine glass as I leaned forward slightly, my voice soft, my tone warm, my expression carefully controlled. "You know what?" I said, pausing just long enough for dramatic effect, just long enough for my mother's eyes to light up, just long enough for Rachel to shift forward in anticipation. "That's actually a really great idea." Their relief was instant, visible, so obvious it was almost embarrassing, my mother practically beaming, my father exhaling as if a weight had been lifted. Rachel's smirk widening just enough to let me know that she had already started imagining what she was going to do with my money. They wanted another wedding? Oh, they were going to get one. Just not the kind they expected. I played my part perfectly, nodding along at the right moments, letting my mother ramble on about floral arrangements and seating charts, pretending to be touched when my father talked about how much it would mean for the family to have a fresh start. I smiled when Rachel casually slipped in a comment about how we should host the ceremony at a grand estate, knowing full well she was thinking about my inheritance, already picturing herself walking through marble hallways, already counting every dollar she believed would one day be hers. They thought I had fallen for it, thought I had let them manipulate me, thought I was so desperate to be part of the family again that I would give them exactly what they wanted. And I let them believe it. I made a public announcement a week later, sharing the news on social media, crafting my words carefully, making sure it spread just fast enough for them to feel like they were in on something special, but vague enough to keep them guessing. I called it a night to remember, a lavish vow renewal, an exclusive event, a grand evening meant to celebrate love, family, and those who had always been there for me. My parents were thrilled, immediately replying with dramatic excitement, telling me how proud they were, how overjoyed they felt, how much it meant to them that we were all coming back together as a family. Rachel, never one to be subtle, sent me a message less than an hour later, asking how much I planned to spend on the event, casually dropping hints about how expensive her dress was going to be. I told her to spare no expense. The night of the event, everything was exactly as I had planned. The venue was stunning, the lighting was soft and elegant, the tables were decorated with lush flowers and flickering candles, the atmosphere buzzing with laughter and conversation as guests arrived dressed in their finest, expecting a night of celebration. My parents showed up draped in expensive outfits, my mother's jewelry sparkling under the chandelier, my father standing a little taller than usual, the proud patriarch who believed he had finally restored his family's image. Rachel waltzed in with her usual air of entitlement, head high, smug and satisfied, as if she had orchestrated the entire thing, as if she had somehow won. They had no idea. As the evening went on, I watched them work the room, smiling at distant relatives they hadn't spoken to in years, pretending they were pillars of the family, subtly reminding everyone just how much they had been involved in bringing us all together. They laughed with old friends, boasted about how proud they were of me, acted like they had been the ones who had supported me through everything, the ones who had stood by me, the ones who had always been in my corner. And then, finally, I stepped onto the stage. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward me, my parents beaming with pride, Rachel standing off to the side, already waiting for her moment to be acknowledged. I took a deep breath, let the silence stretch just long enough to make them feel the anticipation, just long enough for them to feel confident that this moment was going to be about them. And then I began. Tonight is a night to celebrate love, to celebrate loyalty, to celebrate the people who have always been there, through the good and the bad, through the highs and the lows, through every moment that truly mattered. Tonight is not just about me, it's about those who showed up when I needed them the most. I paused, scanning the crowd, letting my gaze drift past my parents without a single flicker of acknowledgement, watching as my mother's smile faltered, as my father's expression stiffened, as Rachel's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. So tonight, I want to honor those who have supported me, who have loved me unconditionally, who have proven, time and time again, that family is not about blood, it's about the people who choose to stand beside you, even when no one else does. I turned toward the first table in front, smiling warmly as I reached out to take the hand of my husband's mother, squeezing it gently before lifting my glass. To the people who showed up on the most important day of my life. To the ones who stood beside me when I walked down the aisle. To the ones who made me feel loved, even when others chose to be somewhere else. Murmurs rippled through the room, some guests exchanging glances, others nodding in understanding, some shifting uncomfortably as they realized exactly what was happening. I kept my gaze steady, my voice calm, my expression unreadable as I lifted my glass higher. To real family. The words landed like a bomb, shattering whatever illusion my parents had built up in their minds, stripping away every lie, every manipulation, every ounce of control they thought they had over me. My mother's face paled, her grip tightening around her wine glass, her eyes darting between me and the guests who were now very clearly realizing that she and my father were not among the people being honored. My father's jaw clenched, his fingers tapping restlessly against the table, his shoulders stiff, his carefully curated mask beginning to crack. Rachel, for the first time in her life, looked genuinely unsure of herself, her usual smug confidence replaced with something that almost looked like fear. And then, as if to seal their fate, the waiters began moving through the room, handing out small envelopes to each guest, personalized thank you notes from me, each one containing a handwritten message expressing my gratitude for their love, their kindness, their unwavering support. Every guest at the event received one. Every guest, except them. My mother blinked, looking around, confusion flickering across her face as she saw other guests opening their envelopes, smiling, nodding, thanking me quietly for the gesture. She reached for a waiter, her voice tight, barely controlled. "Excuse me, I think there's been a mistake." The waiter glanced at her, then at me, waiting for confirmation. I simply smiled, tilting my head slightly, my voice light, casual, almost amused. "Oh, no mistake at all. I only invited the people who actually showed up to my wedding." Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. For the first time in their lives, they knew what it felt like to be left out. And I enjoyed every second of it. The night had ended exactly the way I wanted it to, with my parents and Rachel sitting in stunned silence, their perfect little fantasy shattering around them, their desperate attempt at regaining control slipping through their fingers like sand. I had spent years waiting for them to see me, waiting for them to choose me, waiting for them to treat me like I was worth more than just an afterthought, but that night, as I stood there watching them struggle to process the reality of what had just happened, I felt nothing but satisfaction. I didn't stick around long enough to watch them storm out, didn't need to see the way my mother's face twisted in embarrassment, didn't need to hear my father's feeble attempts at keeping his composure, didn't care enough to witness Rachel's inevitable outburst. Instead, I walked away, head held high, shoulders relaxed, a calm certainty settling over me like a weight I hadn't even realized I had been carrying for years had finally lifted. I had nothing left to say to them, nothing left to give, Nothing left to prove, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely and irrevocably free. But of course, they weren't going to let it end that easily. The next morning, my phone was already buzzing before I had even gotten out of bed, notifications piling up one after another, their desperation practically radiating through the screen. I didn't need to read the messages to know exactly what they said, didn't need to listen to the voicemails to hear the frantic attempts at justification, didn't need to open the emails to recognize the pattern of guilt, manipulation, and carefully worded pleas for forgiveness. Jessica, please, we need to talk about last night. This isn't how families treat each other. We can work through this. We love you. I don't know why you're doing this to us, but this is getting out of hand. We just wanted to be part of your life again. You didn't have to humiliate us like that. Jess, you're being so childish. You've made your point. Now let's stop pretending like we aren't family. We'll forgive you for what you did, but you need to stop acting like a spoiled brat. I read each message slowly, carefully, letting every word cement itself in my mind, letting every fake apology, every attempt at deflecting blame, every subtle insult disguised as concern remind me exactly why I had walked away in the first place. And then, just as expected, Rachel chimed in. Wow! So this is who you are now? Some petty, bitter little girl who can't let go of the past? You're pathetic, Jess. You think you won? You think you proved something? All you did was show everyone how petty you really are. Enjoy your money, because it's the only thing you'll ever have now. I couldn't help it. I actually laughed. Because of course that's what she would say. Of course she would try to twist the narrative. Of course she would try to make it seem like I was the one who had overreacted, the one who had gone too far, the one who had somehow made myself the villain in my own story. It was almost impressive how quickly she could switch from fake sweetness to outright venom, how effortlessly she could convince herself that she was still the victim, that I was still the unreasonable one, that I was the problem. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I did the only thing I knew would truly set me free. I blocked them. All of them. My mother. My father. Rachel. Every number, every email, every social media account, every possible avenue they could use to try and worm their way back in, I erased them from my life completely. Cutting off every last thread that tied me to the people who had spent years making me feel like I was never enough. And the second I did it, the second the last message disappeared, I felt lighter than I ever had before. Later that afternoon, as I was sorting through mail that had been piling up on my kitchen counter, I noticed an envelope with an unfamiliar return address, the handwriting neat and precise, my name written carefully in bold black ink. When I opened it, I found a letter from my aunt and uncle's lawyer, along with a smaller, folded note tucked inside, one that I recognized immediately as my late aunt's handwriting. My breath hitched slightly as I carefully unfolded the paper, my fingers tracing the familiar curves of her words, my eyes scanning the message slowly, taking in every sentence with a lump forming in my throat. Jessica, if you're reading this, then you already know that your uncle and I wanted you to have everything, not just because we love you, but because we trust you. We trust you to build a life that makes you happy, trust you to make decisions that bring you peace, trust you to know that family isn't about who shares your blood, it's about who shows up for you, who chooses you, who loves you without conditions. We always chose you, and we always will. Be happy, sweetheart. That's all we ever wanted for you. I let out a slow breath, my chest tight, my eyes burning slightly, but this time, the emotion wasn't pain or anger or grief, it was relief. Because they had been right. Family wasn't about obligation. It wasn't about chasing after people who refused to love you, wasn't about proving yourself to people who never saw your worth, wasn't about begging for a place in someone's life when they had made it clear time and time again that you were nothing more than an afterthought. Family was about love. About loyalty. About choice. And I was finally choosing myself. That night, as I was cleaning up my apartment, I found an old photo album tucked away in a drawer, one I hadn't looked at in years, one filled with pictures from a childhood that felt like it had belonged to someone else. As I flipped through the pages, I landed on a photo of all four of us, my parents, Rachel, and me, taken at some long-forgotten family event, frozen in time, smiling, pretending, performing the roles we had all been assigned long before I was old enough to understand them. I stared at it for a long moment, my fingers hovering over the edge, debating whether I should burn it, tear it up, erase the last remaining piece of them from my life. But instead, I closed the album, placed it back in the drawer, and walked away without looking back.